Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending. I'd like to give you a quick overview of the Knowage software before starting with the webinar. Knowage is an open source business intelligence suite that provides tools for advanced visualization and analytics. It is indeed developed inside the Knowage Labs, which I'm part of. And these laboratories are a part of the engineering group. Before diving into the details of Python, let me give you a short recap of the whole product so that you can better understand its goal and its features. So first of all, Knowage is an open source software, and its code is hosted on GitHub public repositories. So if you want, you can go there, take a look, but also contribute to it by creating pull requests and so on. Knowage allows users to retrieve data from multiple data sources, which can be different kinds of databases, SQL, NoSQL, files, even Solar, and so on. It is accessible via browser, but also via mobile devices, so smartphones, tablets, and so on. It is released in two different versions, the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition. The software, Knowage, can be integrated inside other products, but also one single analysis made in Knowage can be integrated, for instance, into web pages. So if you have made a dashboard with Knowage and you want to integrate it into your own website, for instance, you can do it. Last but not least, Knowage is cloud ready, which means that can be deployed on cloud environments. At the moment, you can find a Knowage, for instance, on Amazon AWS Marketplace. The goal of the new Python and R enhancements is to join the analytical skills of Knowage with the computational power of modern technologies such as Python and R. So this will be, let me say, an open door towards the universe of Python and big data, but also with all the set of tools and libraries that Python makes available. So in addition to this, Knowage will give you the possibility to make your own script work inside an heterogeneous environment that will be, of course, provided by Knowage. So whenever I write a Python script that produces a visualization, I don't have to deal anymore with the data retrieval or the data cleaning part, but I just have to focus on my business logic. So, which is, in this case, the goal is to create and produce advanced visualizations. As some of you might already know, there already exists a widget that is the HTML widget that allow users to embed their own HTML script inside Knowage. And the Python widget starts from the same idea. But this time, instead of embedding HTML code, we're going to write R or Python script, but the idea behind is the same. So by doing this, programmers or data scientists can directly insert into Knowage the scripts that create their own customized visualization. And by doing this, they can exploit the wide range of tools and libraries that, for instance, Python makes available. So this is one example of advanced cockpit that you can create inside Knowage by using, among other tools, also Python. From this point forward, for my convenience, I'm only going to talk about Python, but keep in mind that the same functionalities will be available through R scripts as well. So whenever I show you something done with Python, you can do it with R scripts as well. Okay, so Now I'm going to run a live demonstration and show you how you can do this in practice. Before starting, let me show you a quick video of a dashboard made with Python, which is this one. And as you can see, this is a Knowage cockpit, which is composed by several different components. Among these components, there is a Python widget that is the one bottom left. Then there are other widgets, for instance, a selector widget, a table widget, and so on. So the nice thing about the Python widget is that, as you can see, it is highly responsive. I mean, you can zoom, you can perform interactions on it. You can zoom, you can move, you can hover with the mouse, and all of these interactions, in the case of the Python widget, are managed directly by the script that runs behind. And this script has been developed and inserted directly by users. The other cool thing is that, as you can see here, the widget runs in an heterogeneous environment, such as the Knowage environment, which means that whenever a user performs a selection or an aggregation on another component of the cockpit, so as you can see in this case, the user selected two brands of cars, Chevrolet and Ford, and all the components, say the table widget, the selector widget, and also the Python widget, all refreshed accordingly. So each one of these components is now showing only data coming from Chevrolet and Ford cars. And this is all managed by Knowage. Nothing changed in the code, nothing changed in the configuration of the widget, but the data and the visualization changed. And it still, as you can see, it still remains interactive. So the user can still interact with it, but this time with the new data. So only Chevrolet and Ford cars. Now I will show you the code that produces this visualization. This is the code, but we will later go into the details of developing the widget. So this was just to give you an overview of the power of this technology and what you can do with it. Okay, so now let's start with the live demonstration, and as usual, let's start from the documentation. For your information, the new Python features come in two different components, which are the Python dataset and the Python widget. We will start from the Python dataset first, and then we will move to the Python widget. So what is the Python dataset? The Python dataset is a way to retrieve data, of course, and retrieve this data directly from a Python script. So whenever I create a Python dataset, my goal is to retrieve data via Python. I can retrieve this data from wherever I want, so I can connect to, I don't know, a remote GitHub repository. I can call a REST service. I can do whatever I want. The only important thing is, at the end, the data that I want to retrieve are stored inside a data frame variable name. So the objective, once again, is to retrieve data and store this data into a data frame variable. And that's it. So I will show you this in practice. Let's go to the dataset section of Knowage. And here, this is a Python dataset. So among the list of existing datasets, as you can see, Knowage allows users to retrieve data in many ways. You can retrieve data from a file, you can write a query, you can call a REST service. Also, you can retrieve data from a Solr index, and many ways. Among all these ways, there is also the possibility to choose Python or R as a dataset type, which means that we are going to retrieve data with a Python script. In this case, the Python script is very simple. It just creates a data frame from a JSON string. And as you can see, the resulting data are stored inside this variable that is a pandas data frame variable, and I specify the name of the variable to Knowage so that Knowage can access this variable and retrieve the data. From this point forward, Knowage will take care of all the rest. So this data retrieved as such will be available inside cockpits, widgets, and so on. So you can make analysis on this data. So whenever I have a data set created as such, I can preview, and as you can see, without changing anything inside the code, I can also give input parameters, so I can personalize the output of this data. What does it mean? For instance, if I insert dog as my animal and I execute the data set, I will see dog among the animals. But if I change the value of the input parameters, this time I can put cat, I will see the cat appearing instead of the dog. And I didn't change anything in the Python script. All of this was managed by Knowage. And this is done with the classic Knowage syntax. The ones of you who already know Knowage may already know this. So in this way, in Knowage, we can specify parameters. So whenever I run this data set, I can give some parameters as input, and the output will change accordingly, but the code will stay the same. The second component is the Python widget, and this is somehow more complicated, so we'll spend a little bit more time on it. Let's start from the documentation as usual, and then we will switch to the live demonstration. Okay, the widget, the goal of the Python widget is to create a visualization from a Python script. What do I have to do to create a widget? Well, I have many different tabs. The tab in which I specify the data set. So this is the dataset tab. In here, I choose the dataset that I'm going to use to produce the visualization. So in this case, the dataset is called the toy dataset. It's a very, very simple dataset that contains information about some people living in the US, for instance. And I will use data coming from this dataset, which, by the way, can be a Python dataset, but also, I don't know, a file dataset, a query dataset. I can have retrieved this data from wherever I wanted. That's already done. In the widget, I'm only accessing this data and use them to produce the required visualization. The second tab, which is the main tab, is the Python editor tab. So this is the tab in which we configure our widget. We insert our script and make the configuration. So the goal of this script is to produce a visualization. This visualization can be of three types. It can be an image, so PNG, JPEG, or so on. Or either it can be an HTML, so an HTML file as output, or a bokeh application. So for the moment, let's keep the bokeh application. We will focus on it later because it's the most complicated kind of output. And let's focus on the first two types of output for the moment. So what do I have to do? When I write the script, I have access to the dataset that I have chosen inside a pandas data frame variable. So whenever I write the script, I have to keep in mind that if I want to access this data, I can do it through a variable that has the same name of the dataset and this of the kind pandas data frame. So whenever I'm ready and I've created my output, I can save it into, in this case, I've chosen to produce an image. So I can save my image in a temporary file. In this example, the name of the output file would be myoutput.png. I specify for Knowage the name of the output file, and I'm ready to go. The last tab is the environment tab. So in here, I have access and I am able to choose among all the different Python environments that I have configured, and I have the possibility to see which library are these environments composed of, and choose the environment in which I want to work. But now let's see it in practice. So let's start and create an empty cockpit. As you can see, when I create a cockpit, among the list of existing available widgets, there is the Python and the R widget. As I said before, for the moment, for my convenience, let's focus only on the Python widget, but keep in mind that the same identical functionalities will be available through R scripts as well. So now let's create an empty Python widget. The first tab, as I was saying before, is the dataset tab. So in here, I can choose the data that I want to use to create my visualization. So in here, I have access to all the datasets that I have configured in Knowage. And as you can see, these datasets are of any kind of type. So file datasets, query dataset, Python and R datasets, and so on. So I just have to pick the data that I want to use and go to the next tab. The next tab is the Python editor. So in here, what I have to do is specify the output type that I want to create. So in this case, for our first example, let's suppose that I want to create an image, which is the most simple kind of output. So for this first example, we will create an image. And then I will go and insert the Python script that creates this image. So as a first example, I have here a very, very simple script that creates a simple line. So as you can see here, this is a really, really basic script. It's just a few lines of code. What the script does is it creates an array of 4 points, and with these 4 points creates a plot, a simple line. The output of this plot will be stored inside this file. So the image that I have produced as output will be stored in the file called the simpleline.png, and all I have to do is tell Knowage, which is the name of the file that will contain my output, so that Knowage will be able to retrieve it. Of course, this is a temporary file, so my Python script will store the image inside this file. Knowage will retrieve it, and Knowage will take care of deleting it. In the environment tab, as I was saying before, I can choose among a list of configured environments. Whenever I pick one environment, I can see the libraries that are installed in that specific environment. So I can check whether I'm okay or not to work with these libraries. If I'm okay, I can go. If I'm not okay with these libraries, I can change environment. So once I am okay with what I've written here, I can save and see the output. Okay, so here, I haven't started the service, sorry. Let me start the service. Okay, so I will say I will save and see the output appearing in the here it is. I will see the output appearing on screen, and this output is produced directly by the Python script that we have just written. So if you remember, I said an array of 4 points, and these are the 4 points plotted on the graph. So this is a really, really basic and simple example, of course. It was just our first example, but now let's switch to something a little bit more complex. So instead of creating a simple line like this, let's suppose that this time I want to create a bar chart. So, and instead of making a data up, so here we are making data up, we are just creating manually an array that contains our data. in our second example, instead of doing this, we will take the data contained inside our dataset. So I will paste here the script. Okay, this is the script of our second example. As you can see, it's still something very, very easy, just a couple of lines of code, nothing difficult. This script uses two libraries, numeric libraries such as pandas and matplotlib to plot our data. What does this script do? Well, it takes the data coming from our toy dataset, which, if you remember, is the dataset we have chosen to use. So this dataset will contain data about some people living in the US, some information about their name, their age, their gender, and so on. And we want to use this data to create a bar chart, so we can access this data directly through the pandas data frame variable that contains them and plot our bar chart. So it will be a visualization of kind bar. On the x-axis, we plot the name, and on the y-axis, we plot the age, for instance. And then we save the output in a bar chart.png. So our output is still an image. The name of this image is bar chart.png. And we don't have to change the environment. We still work in the same environment, so we are ready to go. We save, and we will see our output. So this time, the code that we inserted has created a bar chart instead of a line. So the important thing here is to understand that the output that you see in the cockpit is directly driven by the script that the user has inserted. So I'm free to do in that script whatever I want. Okay, so now that I have given you an idea of what you can do with this technology, let's go to a rather more complex example. So this time I will take a script that is not so simple. I will paste the script here. So as you can see, this script this time is a little bit more complex. It's not just a couple of lines. It starts becoming more and more difficult. So this script this time is using NumPy and matplotlib. NumPy is a numeric library and is used to perform some computation. So this time I'm not only reading data, but I am manipulating them in order to make my visualization. So this script is making some computations. It's calculating sines, cosines, and so on. Then it's creating some colors and so on. At the end, it produces still an image. This time it stores it into a file called compleximage.png. So I have to change the output file name, but the process is the same. So I have my script. I paste the script inside the widget. I save my output inside a temporary file. I specify to Knowage the name of the file in which to retrieve the output, and I save, and I will see the visualization appearing. As you can see, this example is starting to get a little bit more complicated. As you can see, this is something created with computation, calculations, and so on. And this is a complex output. I mean, it's difficult for me to create a visualization such as this one with classic technology. So, of course, if I want to create a line or a bar chart or so on, of course, I can use the classic tools of Knowage. So, of course, if I want to create a bar chart, I will use the bar chart of Knowage. But if I want to create a customized visualization such as this one, I can do it with Python. So in the Python code, I'm not bound to a pre-existing set of widgets, but I can create as many visualizations as I want. I can customize them as much as I want. Okay, so now that I've showed you how this technology works, so far we have focused on the image type of output. Let me say a couple of words of the other two kinds of output. Well, the HTML output works the same as the image output. What do I mean by that? Well, if I want to create an HTML, the process is the same. So what do I have to do is to create my visualization, and at the end, instead of creating an image file, I will create an HTML file. So this time, for instance, suppose that I have my script that is producing an HTML. Instead of saving the image, I will save, for instance, my HTML. There will be an API, a Python API that allows me to do so. For instance, I will save inside output.html file. Then I will take this file, specify it in the proper field, save, and I will see the result appearing to the screen. Same process with images. Instead, bokeh application is a little bit different. So let me show you an example of a bokeh application. Bokeh applications are used to create interactive visualizations. So I have here a script that creates a bokeh application. There it is. As you can see, even this time it's a little bit complicated. It's using some libraries. Among these libraries, we have the bokeh library. Here I'm making some computation, and I'm not only reading data, I'm also modifying them. So this time, instead of using the toy dataset file, let me use another dataset, which is AutoMPG. This time, it's not a simple dataset like the previous one. This is a real-world use case dataset. It contains data about cars, and I'm using this data to create the bokeh application. So here I'm accessing the data coming from the dataset, and I am making some modification to it. So I'm converting some columns to string type. I am deleting some columns. I'm performing some computation and manipulation on the real data. Then I am using those same data to create my visualization. Once I save, I will see the result appearing to the screen. And this is the visualization that I was showing you in the video at the beginning of the webinar. So this visualization, as shown in the video, is highly interactive, which means a user can interact with it by moving or by, for instance, by zooming. A user can also hover with the mouse. And then in the code, I have defined the possibility to interact with these combo boxes. So if a user wants, he can change, for instance, what's plotted on the x-axis and on the y-axis. So if I change this, I will see my visualization changing accordingly. Of course, it's still interactive, move, hover, zoom, and so on. And all of these interactions, so I mean interaction with combo boxes, as well as interactions via the mouse, so hovers and zoom, moves, and so on. All of these interactions inside the widget are managed by the Python script that stays behind. So the person that has developed the script has specified inside the script what happens when a user, for instance, click on the combo box or hover or zoom with the mouse. It's all defined and managed by the script that runs behind. Of course, the cool thing is that I can combine this power, which is the power of Python, with the power of Knowage. What does it mean? Well, it means that I can create a cockpit such as this one, in which I have the same bar chart that I showed you earlier. This is the same bar chart that I showed you earlier, but this time it's not alone in the cockpit. It's besides two other components, a table widget and a selector widget. And this is done to show you that this script does not work alone. What do I mean? Well, I have developed the script that creates the bar chart. But once I'm done, once I have defined the script, I don't have to touch it anymore. It's done. It has created my visualization. But if I interact with the components, so for instance, let's suppose that I'm looking at this cockpit and now I only want to see data from people living in California. So I select California, and as you can see, all the components in the cockpit refresh accordingly. So now every component that I have is showing data from people living in California. Both the table and the Python widget has refreshed accordingly. Both of them are showing only the requested data. And I didn't have to change anything in the code. As you can see, the code is the same. Nothing changed here. So once the script is developed and embedded inside the widget, that's it. I don't have to do nothing else. I just have to interact with the dashboard, and Knowage will take care of the rest. So if I reset my selections, I will see everything coming back to normal. Of course, the same principle works for the interactive visualizations. So suppose that I'm looking at this visualization and I only want to see data coming from, I don't know, Chevrolet cars. So I pick Chevrolet and I will see my visualization changing accordingly. So this time, instead of seeing all the data, I'm seeing only Chevrolet cars. Still, if I want, I can move. I can, I don't know, I can zoom. I can, for instance, change the value of what I have on the X and Y axis, and so on. So the functioning of the widget is the same, but the data change accordingly to what I have selected. And all of these aggregation, selection, and filtering stuff is taken care by Knowage. The last example of widget that you can create with Python is this one. This is the image that we created together earlier. And this is another interactive Python widget. So as you can see, you can do things, the complexity that you want. So you can have fun and do pretty much anything you want. In this case, I had fun creating this visualization that is a little bit strange. It is composed by three, let me say, three tabs. And these three tabs are not alone. I mean, once I interact with one of these, the other two change accordingly. So I have defined some elements that allow me to, for instance, zoom, or to perform selections. And as you can see, once I change what I see in one of these tabs, I see the other two changing as well. So I move one and I see the other two moving. I zoom and the other two zoom as well. So this is to say that all of these interactions are managed by the Python script that I have created besides. So this script is managing all of this stuff. So in this script, of course, you are free to do whatever I want. I showed you some examples, some weird examples, but then from this point forward, you're free to do whatever you want. Okay, before closing, just a couple of words about how to install these new components. Well, in order to use these functionalities, you will have to install a Python web service. You can retrieve this web service either via pip, which is the package distributor of package manager of Python. Or also you can find the code, the Python code, under our Knowage server GitHub repository. So if you want, you can create pulls, forks, and get the code through GitHub. Once you've done this, you have to customize the configuration file. Here you will set parameters according to your own system configuration. You will set addresses, keys, and so on. Once you're ready to go, you will have to run this server. So here we suggest one solution, which is GUnicorn, which is a WSGI server that works in Unix environments. So if you're working in Unix environments, you can take a look at it, or either you can find some alternatives. In the Flask documentation, since the web service leverages on Flask, on the Flask documentation, you can find all the kinds of solution that you want. The last thing that you have to do to use these functionalities is to go on the configuration management of Knowage. Well, first of all, you go to the roles management section, and you have to authorize in the authorization tab, you have to authorize user to edit Python and other scripts. So you have to flag this one, so that for each user that you want to allow to use the Python functionalities. Once you have done this, you can create, you can configure the Python address inside the configuration management tab. So as you can see here, I have created some variables of category Python configuration, and here you specify the address of your web service, of your Python web service. So the web service that you have installed and run will be available at an address and port, and here you will tell Knowage how to reach that web service. Of course, you can define as many web service instances as you want. Each one of them works maybe with different libraries and different versions of Python, different versions of libraries, and so on. So from time to time, you can decide to use one or another, depending on which libraries and versions of Python you want to use. Okay, and that's pretty much everything. I hope I have been clear, and I hope I have satisfied your expectations. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.